Hi, everybody. Today is Monday, March 16, 2026, and our dear friend, our brother Pepe Escobar is here with us. Welcome back, Pep.
Brother Nima, always a pleasure. And all of you, our audience, greetings from a peaceful Buddhist country in Southeast Asia.
Yeah. Pepe, let me start with what Donald Trump was asking, somehow begging, if I can put it this way, other countries to join him in the Strait of Hormuz to facilitate, the passage of tankers in this strait. And so far, what we've learned from I'm quoting the German government. So, what does Trump expect from a handful of European frigates that the powerful U.S. Navy can't do? This is not our war, and we didn't start it. Australia, we won't be sending a ship to the Strait of Hormuz. The United Kingdom, reopening the strait is not a simple task. The United Kingdom will not be drawn into a wider war. And France, there is no question of sending any vessels to the Strait of Hormuz. Japan, circumstances do not warrant military participation for Japan. When it comes to China, no comment. And what is happening, Pep? Because Donald Trump somehow thought at least he can make some political move, if not militarily. But it doesn't seem that would be the case. Your understanding of that?
Well, even if most of these governments that you listed are nearly brain dead, they're not totally dumb. They have at least analysts or are people working in their foreign offices that have at least a basic idea of what's really going on in the Strait of Hormuz. And of course, if they're monitoring what Foreign Minister Arakshi, the leader of the Majlis Kalibaf, several layers of IRGC officers are saying, they understand that the Strait of Hormuz, for all practical purposes, is not blocked, but it's blocked for any ship that has US, Israeli, or hostile, which means the whole of NATO interests against Iran. It's open for everybody else, and everybody else can pick up the phone, write a letter, contact the Iranians, and try to come up with a deal, which is, for instance, what the Bangladeshis did. Oil tankers and gas tankers going to Bangladesh, now they have free passage. India is an immensely complicated story. Only a few, if I'm not mistaken, only two Indian tankers so far got free passage, but that was a tit for tat deal concerning Iranian tankers that were stranded somewhere in India or near India. That's a different story. So this probably will be negotiated case by case. After the betrayal of Iran by India, largely documented, provoking reactions from some of the best Indian scholars, military analysts, diplomats who are not allied with Modi and the BJP. They are appalled. They said that the Indian foreign policy simply disappeared, and now obviously our dreams of being leader of the global South vanished. And of course, the West as a whole. It won't be open for the West, period. And there's not even negotiation involved. So these governments, once again, if they are not completely brain dead, they know that if they get into this hastily disorganized, not even organized, Trump flotilla to go to liberate the Strait of Hormuz, they are going to get into a massive black void, which will include, of course, lots of casualties for their striking force. So this is not going to move. And the desperation on Neo Caligula, we can call him a neo-Crassus as well. I'm working tomorrow on a column comparing Crassus with Trump, even though he was not an emperor. He was a member of the triumvirate, but the psychology is the same. They know that this is absolutely impossible. And obviously, around the circle that actually talks to Trump and he listens to, which is probably not more than 5 or 6 people, exaggerating 10, like people in the Pentagon with actual, even remote war experience, or independent analysts, former CIA analysts, for instance. He doesn't listen to these people. Even some who used to be in contact with him, for instance, Colonel McGregor. Trump only listens to that massive amount of fake news emanating from Fox News and people like Hegseth. Oh, no, not Hegseth. Let's rearrange this. The push-up clown Christian Zionist posing as Secretary of Forever Wars. This is what the head of the Pentagon is now in this administration. Guzano Rubio, he could not point Iran on a map, in fact. And that's it. He already sidelined J.D. Vance and Tulsi Gabbard, members of his own administration. So he only listens to sycophants and vassals and people with an extremely limited, if I would say less than zero understanding of what's happening in the battlefield at the moment, not to mention how the Iranian system works and how is it working under the new supreme leader, Mossadegh Khamenei. So this is, we're going to be following this new plot twist for a while, assuming the Americans are able to mount a strike force, and assuming they are able to send this strike force from somewhere in the Arabian Sea towards the Gulf of Oman and the Persian Gulf, or from the Red Sea, crossing the Bab el-Mandeb, and then go closer to the Persian Gulf. So it's a series of ifs, one more lethal and volatile than the other. The absolute key issue, Nima, which is it's the theme of my next column, which is going to be published in the Cradle probably tomorrow. Already sent it, but it takes a while for them because they had to translate it into Turkish and Arabic. So it takes a while, so it's published usually the next day. Is this lethal blow against the petro-yuan? And that's what driving not only Neo-Caligula or Neo-Crassus, but the sycophants around him, and especially the American elites in the background who gave the go-ahead for this war. Because if this goes on for an extra few weeks, this is the beginning of the end of the petrodollar. And that means is the beginning of the end of unilateral hegemonic empire ruling over virtually most of the planet. And that's where we are now. Some people, at least in the US, are realizing how big the stakes are. And there's no turning back. And this is what we hear from the Iranians day after day. Even if Trump would, which we know it's not going to happen, he's a prisoner in the labyrinth of his own hubris. So he cannot back down. He cannot confess that he lost his bet. Even if he would say in the next few days, obviously in one of those interminable rambling posts, okay, we won. We won, we decimated everything, their air force, their navy, we're decimating Iran, So I proclaimed victory and that's it. That's the end. This would not be the end because Iran would continue. And all the US interests in Israel itself, and all across West Asia would continue to be attacked by Iran. So there will be no ceasefire. And now Arakshi is saying it bluntly, no ceasefire. So everybody with an IQ of 10 can understand the Iranian position. So there's no way out for him. And that's the problem, Nima. He's going to get even more dangerous than he already is.
Yeah. Pepe, you mentioned something so important, in my opinion, that is the shift from petrodollar to petro yuan. And it's a financial nuclear move, I would assume. It's not something so small to be ignored. It's huge what is going on. What is the outcome of that? How do you see because for many years we were talking about, I think on my side, on my understanding, that if the United States wants something, a strategic partner in the Middle East, in the West Asia, that would be Iran, for example, before. But that was not the American agenda, because the foreign policy of America, of the United States, is run by Israelis, is run by Netanyahu and in Israel. That's why I think we are far away. You know, we can ignore that. The United States is not going to change its attitude. It's going to great length to destroy Iran and, you know, break down Iran in provinces. And you see a new partnership coming out of the conflicts, both in Ukraine and in the Middle East. A new, you know, this is a partnership. It goes beyond alliance, Pepe. It's not something as we saw with the G7 or with NATO. It's something different. It is of different nature. And how do you understand this sort of partnership that is shaping? I think it's strengthening.
This is what I explained briefly in this column. This may be, let's say, a pre-column to a much deeper essay later on as the war progresses, of course. But the key, in fact, one of the key items which I had to re-stress, all over again, is how the petrodollar is an absolutely massive scam that the Americans thought would be forever. Since the deal was struck, the deal was imposed on the Arabs in 1974 after the oil shock of 1973. It's a very simple scam, but immensely effective for the hegemonic power. So they forced the GCC and OPEC, and that continued since 1974. You have to you can only trade your oil and gas in US dollars. That's it. Nothing else is allowed. Thus, the name petrodollar. And you invest all your profits, all your surpluses in the American economy. You can buy US Treasury bonds, you can buy stocks. Nowadays, especially, you can finance our big tech investments in the US. So they have all that tsunami of funds coming from the GCC countries into the American economy. That props up the dollar. So it keeps the dollar as the reserve currency for the whole planet. That finances the industrial military complex. Very, very important. These forever wars, now being theoretically supervised by the Secretary of Forever Wars, the push-up clown, the Zionist Christian, they are financed by the GCC essentially and other OPEC contributors. And of course, the most important thing, all this tsunami of cash bails out the US from paying their unpayable debt, which is now $40 trillion. So it's a beautiful mafia-style scheme. It has been working almost like clockwork since 1974. So what do we have now? That's the beauty of the whole thing, because it's also very, very simple. Iran, with one move, and this one, that's why I say it's financially nuclear. Iran didn't need a nuclear bomb of thousands of Khorramshahr 4 missiles to change the rules of the game vis-a-vis the petrodollar. Just like that. If you block the most important choke point of trade on the planet, where you have 20% of the planet's oil moving on an everyday basis, 24/7, 365 days a year, you change the rules of the game. You install, it's like Iran installed a toll gate at the Strait of Hormuz. You don't see the toll gate. Like when we're driving on the highway, they're okay, 10 minutes, get ready, your credit card, your pass, or whatever. No, there's an invisible toll gate. And it was fascinating. There was a footage from an Iranian reporter yesterday. He was sailing the Strait of Hormuz, and he shows in the video the exact line that tankers cannot cross. And if they cross, automatically the IRGC sends drones against them. This is an absolutely fascinating piece of footage. So that's it. You install your invisible toll gate. You tell your friends, okay, you just call us, we make a deal, and your ships can go. With China, it's more than obvious because the deal has been in place for days now. In the case of Bangladesh, there were negotiations. In the case of India, case-by-case basis. And with everybody else, it's going to be case-by-case basis. But if you are from U.S., allied with Israeli interests, or from NATO, that's it. Forget it. It's blocked for you. So no wonder apparently there are more than 700 LNG tankers stranded on both sides of the Strait of Hormuz as we speak. And there are going to be more, certainly. So with one move, they turn upside down the insurance industry. No insurer will insure any tanker anywhere to cross the strait because they know it's suicidal. In terms of the effects for the western part of the global economy is a tragedy. In terms of the effects on the Asian part, it depends how they're going to deal with Iran. For instance, South Korea and Japan may approach Tehran and try to get a deal. It's still too early to tell. We don't know. Probably Japan won't do it because Japan is a vassal colony of the United States. South Korea, it's different. And in terms of China, there's no problem because China continues to receive oil and gas from Iran because they struck a deal a few days ago. And this is part of their 25-year comprehensive strategic partnership, which is Iran sells energy and China invests in building infrastructure in Iran. But the game, the petrodollar game, now it's already going upside down. And you have the whole global south paying attention and getting the message. We got the message. If we deal with petro yuan, it's all right for everybody, for us, for China, for Russia, for Iran, for BRICS, you name it. And that's it. That's going to be the new name of the game. So when the Americans look at that, Nima, no wonder they are freaking out like they haven't freaked out like this since, I don't know, forever. That's it. This is, in a nutshell, it's what's going on now. And this is why the move to block the petro yuan in one choke point, the choke point that matters the most for the global economy, is much more serious than any military defeat that Iran might inflict on Israel or the US.
Pepe, when it comes to Israel, I think is how long Israel can sustain this war. Looking at what is happening in Iran, and every time they come with a rhetoric on the part of Donald Trump, that Donald Trump says, I'm not going to negotiate with them. I'm not going to, we're going to attack. We're going to continue attacking Iran, he said recently. And he was, the reporter asked the Iranian foreign minister about if Iran is prepared for ceasefire or negotiations. Here is what Araghchi said.
Exactly.
This weekend, he is not ready to make a deal with Iran because the terms aren't good enough yet. His administration is saying this war could last another 3.5 weeks or so. Has Iran asked for a ceasefire?
No, we never asked for a ceasefire, and we have never ask even for negotiation. We are ready to defend ourselves as long as it takes. And this is what we have done so far, and we continue to do that until President Trump comes to the point that this is an illegal war with no victory, and there are people being killed only because President Trump wants to have fun. This is what he has said.
Yeah, the main point that Pepe, you don't see, even following the Persian media, you don't see any sort of rush in what's going on. They are so much prepared. They are so much patient. They don't have to put an end to the conflict, as Donald Trump tries to do as soon as possible. They're so much comfortable. They are confident that they can continue this war as long as it takes. On the other hand, you don't see that much of confidence in Israel. I don't know how much you follow the Israeli media. There's so much, you see a lot of desperation coming out. And right now, nobody knows where is Benjamin Netanyahu. He wasn't there, and we've seen 2 AI videos. I don't know how can we translate that. He's hiding somewhere, or he was, killed in an operation. Nobody knows what is happening right
Nobody
now.
knows. Yeah. Crappy AI videos there.
Yeah, exactly.
Zillions of people on the net pointed to all the discrepancies on both videos so far. There are probably going to be more. They don't even bother to do something that is convincing, which proves that they must be, submerged by all sorts of hell around them. Look, it doesn't matter what Trump says anymore, really, because it's rambling, because it's an accumulation of fake news and lies, accusations, racism. When he talked about directly, he talked about the bad DNA in Iran. He insulted the whole population of Iran and the Iranian diaspora as a whole. So this is as cheap and as low. How low can you go? In terms of Trump, he can go lower than anybody. In fact, it's the only thing that he knows how to do. And never backing down, because that's how he learned to conduct business from his mafioso masters, in New York and New Jersey. So that's irrelevant. What is not irrelevant is he's in command of extremely destructive power. There's no question. Even the Americans, even with all their losses, they are immensely violent and immensely destructive. And of course, it's no wonder that the unthinkable is resurging here and there and everywhere, which would be resort to tactical nuclear weapons, or even a nuclear weapon, either from the US or from Israel, or both. If it happens, it will be obviously concerted. So that's why it's so dangerous, because you're dealing with an irrational megalomanian cycle, totally cornered. He brought this on himself. He cannot throw his bunch of ultra mediocre cycle funds and whatever under the bus, because first of all, because nobody believes him. He made the ultimate decision. Since we cannot trust on anything coming from American media, whatever that is, New York Times, Washington Post, Wall Street Journal, Axios, all of these lie for business. And they lie to protect their assets, to protect their jobs, to protect their position inside the Michimat, industrial, military, congressional, intelligence, media, academia, think tank complex, in the definition of our friend Ray McGovern. So you cannot trust anything they say. Sometimes they leak stuff that may be closer to the truth. Like some people may have told Trump what he was getting into before the war. It's possible. Certainly not Tweedledee and Tweedledum, the immensely stupid Witkoff and Kushner. Certainly not the Christian Zionist Secretary of Forever Wars. Maybe some other people. who are not named, by the way, specifically, who alerted him that don't do that. But now it's too late. And now it's too late and there's no way out. So we keep coming back to hubris going up non-stop. And there's nothing to stop it. And like we were commenting before, even if he proposed a ceasefire and he said, I'm out, it doesn't matter because the effects are already rolling. The negative effects for the whole global economy, the negative effects for US interests all across West Asia, the negative effects for Israel becoming, on the way to, it could be easily raised to parking lot level by Iran within the next 2, 3, 4 months, if this keeps going on. And the effects are already there. And even minor effects like the Chihuahuas, yapping, no, we're not going to join your strike force to liberate Hormuz. We don't want to get killed ourselves. This is we can say this with the comic tinge because it is comic. And obviously he gets even more enraged because he said, no, look, I helped you, NATO, in Ukraine. Now you have to help me, the US, in Iran. It's a completely different story. Completely different story. The US didn't help shit in Ukraine. NATO is controlled by the US. The war in Ukraine is a NATO war against Russia, proxy war, where NATO is controlled by the US. This is how it works. Anybody that has anybody in primary school knows that,
I think the key point is from Germany, Pepe, because they said, what else can we bring to the table? Because
basically he's saying, I am a little chihuahua here in Europe. I have nothing to offer you. It's humiliating for a former great trading power who wanted to become one of the leading 3 or 4 superpowers in the world, now reduced to the status of a mere sobbing chihuahua. It's pathetic. They deserve it. They also brought this on themselves.
Pepe, I think what we are witnessing in the Trump administration is a combination of hubris and stupidity, because it's not just about, the same day that Pete Hegseth was talking about that the leadership in Iran is hiding, the leadership has gone into hiding, or they have gone underground. We've seen the Iranian president
was in the streets,
all on the streets. It's somehow he's talking about these people. They're hiding like rats. This sort of language and getting together with Donald Trump, arguing that these people are sick because of their genetics, because they're not like us. This is the same sort of attitude as the Benjamin Netanyahu's government. They're calling Palestinians Amalek.
Yes.
Amalek, it's the same. It's a racist comment. But when it comes to this stupidity, and as the Trump administration somehow feels that the Chinese government would help him against Iran, as the China is witnessing, it's just seeing how the United States is diminishing its picture, its power, and it's destroying its picture all around the world. Why do they need to help you? Even your partners in, your vassals in Europe, they don't want to help you. How come you bring China to the scene and you're asking China to do that? It's unbelievable. The level of,
stupidity,
just beyond belief. Yeah. What do you make of the Trump administration and the way that they're trying somehow to manipulate the mainstream media?
I'm more interested in look. Maybe I'm getting too old, Nima, and your audience, but look, I have 42 years as a foreign correspondent all across the planet, everywhere that matters. I saw that I had seen all sorts of shit, but this goes beyond anything. So I don't even bother to follow the details anymore. My inbox is flooded with shit every day, because I am on mailing list of every think tank you can imagine, publications that I stopped subscribing, like the Washington Post or the Economist. I still receive shit all the time. So the most important thing and the most challenging is the Chinese reaction. And it's not the Chinese reaction, is how the Chinese have been playing the game, which is what I put it on the headline of my column. How Iran and China have gamed the chessboard. And it's a beauty to see now. So, backtrack years ago, China was building what they never admit outright, because they know how it's going to be interpreting, in Washington, how to overhaul the international system, the system of international relations, to the benefit of China, to the benefit of the global South. So they start building multilateral organizations. They are big. Their incentives towards BRICS and the SCO, to make BRICS and SCO much more consequent, right? They keep expanding the Belt and Road Initiative, the New Silk Roads. They turbocharge their diplomacy. Their diplomacy now is much more active and proactive than before, when it was basically passive and reactive. Not anymore. And of course, they are working very closely, especially with Russia, into organizing an alternative system, or a payment settlement system, inside BRICS and outside BRICS. The CIPS, the China International Paying System, which, by the way, is being used by Iran to pay what they buy from China, and it's used by China to pay Iran in yuans for the energy that they buy from Iran. CIPS now is being, if I'm not mistaken, over 150 nations are already, if not direct members, but they are getting there. They're going to start to use CIPS sooner rather than later. So they don't even need BRICS for that. If BRICS, because of the internal contradictions of BRICS, cannot, especially this year where the traitor Indian government is hosting the BRICS summit later this year in New Delhi, they cannot get into an agreement of alternative payment system, which of their mechanisms they all agree upon, etc. China is already sailing with CIPS, and more countries in the global South will start settling their trade with China in CIPS. So China has been building this system, especially since Xi Jinping came to power in 2012. The New Silk Roads, the Belt and Road Initiative, was launched in 2013. It was only 1 year in power for Xi. And then it started to pick up speed very, very, very fast. Now, Iran, and this is something that, of course, we will never have an official confirmation in Tehran or in Beijing, but it's obvious that they discuss this at the highest level. It's obvious. It's part of their strategic partnership. Iran offers to China on a plate the single move that is capable of turning the petrodollar upside down. It did not come from China. It did not come from BRICS. It did not come from an alternative payment system. It came from a country under war, attacked by the so-called most powerful army on the planet, fighting to survive, and still in the middle of the war, they come up with the definitive move, which people in the US with a brain knew it would happen. I think I told you and many other podcasts that this is something that many of us were discussing in 2017, 2018, 2019, many years ago, even before COVID. What would happen if the Strait of Hormuz is blocked? And that comes back to those Goldman Sachs projections that oil could reach not 100, 150, which could be in the next few days, not 200, which could be in the next 2 weeks, but 700. And then is the total collapse of the global economy. And we are on that road already. So Iran pulls one move, which certainly was discussed with China. Because don't forget, when Iran pulled that move, they had already clinched the deal with China, authorizing free passage for any tanker delivering energy to China. And with this one move, the whole Ponzi scheme may collapse. That's why, once again, as I opted to write a first short column, but just to give an idea to our readers how mind-bogglingly game-changing this whole thing is. And it takes one single move, and it doesn't take a nuclear bomb, it doesn't take ballistic missiles in the middle of a war, which explains the absolute desperation of the Americans now. Because this is something they cannot even revert, Nima. They cannot have a strike force to send to Hormuz. They're going to be decimated if they do that. Everybody knows that. The southern shore of the Persian Gulf, the Iranian shore, is crammed with anti-ship missiles, with zillions of drones, with mines that have not even installed yet, with those fast boats that can wreak havoc around any tanker. That's it. They have zillions of ways of blocking even further passage in the Strait of Hormuz. So that's what it takes. You choose your choke point, you strangle it, and that's it. You have the empire like this, hanging by a thread. And that's where we are now. It is immensely impressive. And of course, we could say that this is the culmination of the way China has been playing the game, has been gaming the chessboard all the time. And that's why I made an analogy, with Go, Wei Qi, which Go, the game of Go. When you control the chessboard, the game plays by itself. So China was already controlling the chessboard. So this latest Iranian move, even if it was not foreseen before, of course, but strategically the Chinese have thought about it. If that happens, how do we profit from it? Well, you gain the chessboard, so the chessboard would arrive at this particular juncture. You can corner the empire, you can surround your enemy with just one move. And that's why this is analogically and metaphorically, it's beautiful because it's a mix of chess that Iranians play better than almost anybody and Go. It's a mix of chess and Go. Absolutely fascinating. And now the empire is hanging by a thread in total desperation. And the people who had foreseen that, they don't have a say in government. You can ask a lot of Goldman Sachs analysts. They knew this was coming. You can ask, like at the time, for instance, we were in touch with Zoltan Poznar when he was the chief analyst of Credit Suisse. Zoltan wrote about this in detail, but now it's too late.
Pepe, I think if it was Donald Trump, running Iran, he would ask any country to pay him before passing the Strait of Hormuz. But
yes, exactly. And the Iranians are not asking for money.
No,
they're asking for, okay, come to us, we discuss. If we think it's okay, you can go. You don't have to pay us anything.
I think that's why
it is an invisible toll booth. It's a toll booth where you don't need to insert your credit card in the machine to get a ticket and go through. No, you need to talk to the owner.
The other move that could be, somehow a facilitator to petro yuan would be Iran asking all of these countries to sell their oil and gas by petro yuan, by yuan, and then using the SIPs, instead of using SWIFT. And these
This is
are
the next stage. Yeah, this is the next stage, Nima. And this is something that the Chinese can, with the Chinese finesse, very sophisticated, can suggest to the people, and especially the GCC petromonarchies. Well, of course, the Chinese already told Saudi Arabia about that. The Chinese already told Saudi Arabia that sooner or later, everything that we buy from you is going to be petro yuan. The Saudis could not do that before because obviously they would be literally invaded by the Americans in 24 hours, and all their money, which is in London, New York, would be confiscated. But from now on, all bets are off. And if that's one of the major ifs ahead, all these American bases totally destroyed in West Asia, they won't be rebuilt, probably. So this means no more empire of bases in West Asia. The GCC will need a new umbrella, a new security umbrella, especially because if they have a brain and they look at what the American umbrella did for them now, if they have a brain, they are learning their lesson. And who is going to provide that umbrella in the future? There are only two candidates, Russia and China. There you go. Once again. But this is too far away from where we are at the moment. We are at stage number 1, which is the possible beginning of the end of the petrodollar. And that already in itself is enormous.
I think the move in Ukraine is being, in the process of, being, getting perfect with the conflict in the West Asia, because somehow all of these Arab states would ask themselves, so what is the main point of the US bases in our countries if they're not providing us with security? So who's able to do that? And the Iranian generals they're talking about, they're not, it doesn't matter what would happen with this war on Iran, they're not going to accept any US bases in these countries. I don't see, Pepe, the United States gaining anything as time goes by. And what would be the point of getting back to Saudi Arabia? What is the gain? What is the benefit for the Saudi Arabia? What are they going to do for Saudi Arabia? These are questions right now in the mind of the leaders in these countries. So who's going to replace the United States? Or maybe we have...
Assuming they have a plan, Nima, most of them don't. Don't forget, these are ruthless gangsters, most of them. One family ruling the whole nation. Artificial nations, most of them. MBS, and this is very hard to confirm, but according to many of our sources who have access to the House of Saud, he is still in bed with the Americans. This means against Iran. There's no evidence that he's trying even to perform a mediator role. So some of them don't have brains at all, and don't expect anything really intelligent coming from MBZ in the Emirates. He was basically sitting on a gigantic laundering machine and a gigantic scam, of course. Profiting the Americans. He doesn't have a plan B. And now his business model for Dubai specifically is dead. And it may be in Abu Dhabi as well. If the Iranians decide that that's it, let's rid Abu Dhabi oil production from the map, which is something they can do any minute. So we should not put any trust on these people. Maybe the Qataris, because the Qataris are, well, I had a few interactions with the Qataris, and some of them, even though, of course, they are completely brainwashed by the Anglo-American elites, especially the Anglo elites, and some of them the old French elites. They may see that, okay, that's it, let's do something else, and at least be good neighbors with Iran, at least. And they are going to invest their money in, Qatar is already doing that. They're investing most of their funds in Europe. So it's different. Bahrain is dead. Bahrain doesn't count for it. Bahrain now is collapsing in front of our eyes. So there will be a major reorganization of the GCC. We still don't know where, but obviously, anybody that thinks 2 seconds about what happened will know that the American protection umbrella is dead and probably is not coming back. And this, once again, coming back to our major theme, this was the other side of the petrodollar. The other side of the petrodollar was we, the most powerful army in the history of the galaxies of Star Wars, will protect you. So basically, the GCC, they were buying protection from the Americas. Look what is happening now.
Pepe, here is what the U.S. Energy Secretary said about the Strait of Hormuz.
Oh my God, this is an absolute asshole. Oh my God, this is, yes, please play it, please. Sorry.
There's a big debate over whether you all were prepared for what's happening in the Strait of Hormuz. If you were prepared, why is the Strait of Hormuz effectively closed right now?
Because it's right near the Iranian shoreline. The world is abundantly supplied with oil and energy. We knew there would be a short-term disruption in energy flows. And to hear Chuck Schumer say that we didn't, it's just so he knows how foolish that is. And to say stuff to try to undermine the United States in the midst of a world-changing conflict just boggles my mind. But this mission was carefully planned out. It's been superbly executed. On the other side, we'll be in a much better place. The greatest driver of terrorism in the world, the greatest threat to global energy supplies will be defanged. Yes, we have disruption to get there, but we're going to be in a much, much better place in the not too distant future.
Mr. Secretary, let's talk about Russia. The Treasury Department temporarily lifting sanctions on.
Yeah.
No comments, Nima. It's an imbecile. It's pointless. He spells it out, his stupidity by himself. So we don't need to comment on that.
Yeah, but the greater question, Pepe, would be Russia and how is the conflict in Ukraine coming to the conflict with Iran, the two wars that are happening. The combination of both is somehow reshaping Russian strategy. How do you see Russia, the way that Russia sees the conflict in the West Asia?
Let's wait. It's too early to tell. If I'm back in Russia next month, I hope I'll be able to ask this in person to a lot of people that matter. But I can imagine nowadays the echoes that I'm getting is there's a lot of discomfort in Moscow deciding circles about the whole thing. But of course, at the same time, they know that this is the same war, by the way. It's not two different wars. It's the same war. The same war against Russia and against Iran. Not by accident, two of the existential threats to the empire, according to their own national security strategy, even if they try to alleviate a little bit in the last redaction. Two top BRICS, interlinked, and two top proponents of a new system of international relations. So it's a war against two top BRICS, three top BRICS, because it's also against China. So this is de facto hot war against the BRICS. We thought it would take a long time for this the stage of hybrid war to get into hot. It got there in a flash. So people in positions of power in Moscow, they know this very, very well. There is a very, very serious debate on what to do with Ukraine now. Many people very well positioned, including people in the intel apparatus, said, that's it. Let's go for the head of the snake. That's it. It took too long. Let's finish this war now. But that's not the strategy of President Putin. So the least we can expect is a serious debate at the highest levels, at the Security Council level in Russia, on are we going to change our strategy now? Are we going to keep doing what we're doing but more forceful? Or are we going to launch a super offensive and finish this off before the end of the year? Or, of course, what some, I would say, more well-informed, patriotic, serious people, but already exasperated, are saying, no, that's it. Let's finish it off now. So, the debate is on. I hope I can have more from the inside next month.
Does it mean that they're feeling that the situation with the negotiations with Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner is leading nowhere?
Nobody believes in these negotiations, Nima, especially now. The same two, Tweedledee and Tweedledum, were negotiating with the Iranians, and we saw what happened. The same two. Jared Kushner cannot negotiate how to buy a hot dog on Fifth Avenue in New York City. And now he's posing as a bloody diplomat. Witkoff is slightly more prepared. But still, come on, he's a rookie. He doesn't understand how diplomacy works. And he's dealing with the best diplomatic corps on the planet, the Russians. Not to mention the best prepared leader in the world, Vladimir Putin. It's pathetic. So obviously, because the Russians are so polite, so respectful of diplomatic norms and diplomatic processes, they play along. But now it's different. If they're interested in having a real solution to their Ukraine problem, let's put it this way, they're going to have to change their strategy. Otherwise, this war could go on for not for another year, for another 2, 3, 4 years. Because the Europeans, it's obvious the European position is not going to change, even if they don't have money to pay for the war. Even if Trump, Neo-Caligula, Neo-Crassus, whatever, decides to abandon them, which he won't. The US will be leading from behind. But NATO is the same thing. NATO's armies are a joke compared to a battle-hardened army like the Russians have now. But they still insist that the war will keep going, and they are going to rearm because there will be war against Russia by 2030, according to NATO internal documents. It's the madness did not disappear because of the war on Iran.
I think before wrapping up, Pepe, the other aspect of the conflict of the war would be if Houthis or Yemenis decide to close the Bab al-Mandab, the Red Sea. That would be hugely influential. And do you see that happening anytime soon?
Yes, it's quite possible. There are some our contacts in Sana. There are some echoes. They are not saying that explicitly. They are just saying it's on the table. We may decide to get into the war side by side with Iran. And of course, the first thing they'll do is to close the Bab al-Mandab. And by extension, the Red Sea. So that's it. They can do it. If that happens, then it's, in terms of the global economy, then it's mega. Because we are in the chaos moment. It's going to be mega chaos. And they can do it. And of course, and if they are attacked by Israel, then all bets are off. Then they will go all the way.
Yeah.
Our friend Larry, this is amazing.
Brother Pepe. Hey, man. You've been doing
hey.
good.
¿Qué tal, cabrón? ¿Cómo estás?
Aguantando. A pesar de que caos.
Aguantando. Wonderful. I love your ersatz porteño accent. It's wonderful.
I got that it's Spanish with an Italian accent, okay?
It's beautiful.
So,
Okay, before I leave, Larry, can I ask you a question?
sure.
Maybe to launch your next hour. Give me your, how could I put it, Cheech and Chong interpretation of the Trump Armada going to liberate the Strait of Hormuz.
Well, he's still looking for it, Come on, everybody, let's get him. Let's go get him charged. He looks behind, nobody's there.
There's nobody there.
I'm watching. You'd like to, if people weren't dying, and if there wasn't so much destruction being caused, this would be hilarious. This would be like a Monty Python skit on cocaine, just amped up and just crazy. And they keep jumping from, narrative to narrative and lying throughout. For example, they claimed that those two KC-135s ran into each other and the one plane crashed. No, that didn't. It was shot down. I mean, I've got that confirmed. It was shot down. They are effectively out now of THAAD missiles and Patriot 3, the PAC-3s. They're out, depleted. And nobody seems to grasp that. So, I mean, it's the lie after lie being presented in this narrative, and they're still waiting for Iran to surrender. We got to run right where we want them. And Iran is like, okay, you started this, we'll finish it. And the fact that I guess CIA tried to brief Trump on the danger of closing the Strait of Hormuz. So the good news is CIA was doing its job. But as is typical of so many of these instances, the president decides, I know best, and they ignore the intelligence. At which point now the intelligence community is starting to leak out. Now, we told him, he just ignored it. So I don't see how Trump gets out of this, frankly.
Well, the CIA is covering their asses now. This is what they do, right? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
they obviously told him this is and the people with an IQ over 10 in the Pentagon also know it because they gamed it before.
Yeah, you see when leaks, the Wall Street Journal put out an article pretty detailed about how, Trump was warned about this and warned about that. So whenever you see that is, the way the game is played in Washington is if the policy's going great and everybody agrees on it, there are no leaks or only leaks that put the administration in the most favorable light. But when it's going south, then everybody, it's like every man for themselves, every man and woman for themselves. And so they'll start leaking and putting out the information about what's really going on. And Trump can try as hard as he wants to try to cover that up, but he can't do it.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Larry. I'm
all right, brother.
Obrigado, Pepe.
Thanks, Ima. Thanks, Larry. Thanks, our audience. And now Larry's going to kick major ass. Cheers. Bye-bye.
All right, my friend. Bye.
See you soon, Pepe.
Yes.
How's everything, Larry?
You call that a shirt? Hey, come on. I should make you get up right now and go change your shirt. You're sitting there going, oh, my God, Johnson's acting like my father and a mean father at that.
No.
Okay. No, yeah. It's very.
I'm going to be back on Friday.
It looks very nice. I'm sure you've got your academic clothes on.
Yeah, because the classes are just starting and I have to go. Yeah. Larry, let me start. Since you mentioned the case of, CIA, it seems that the CIA is preparing something for Tucker Carlson, and they want to go against him. Here is what Tucker Carlson said. I want to understand what is your take on that.
is preparing some kind of criminal referral against me, a crime report to the Department of Justice on the basis of a supposed crime I committed. What's that crime? Well, talking to people in Iran before the war. They read my texts. So the crime under consideration apparently would be the Foreign Agent Act or something like that, acting as an agent of a foreign power. And I don't expect this to go anywhere. I'm not too worried about an actual criminal case against me for a bunch of reasons. One, I'm not an agent of a foreign power. Unlike a lot of people commenting on U.S. politics and global affairs, I have only one loyalty, and that's the United States.
Yeah. Larry, what do you make of what Tucker Carlson is talking about? It could be a serious case that he came out and talked about it.
Yeah, it's not a serious case. There is no legal foundation for this. You're required to register as a foreign agent if you're acting on behalf of a foreign government, and they're paying you and they're directing you, here, say this and do this. I don't, Tucker and I are not by any stretch best friends or great acquaintances. We've had text exchanges over the years, and he's called me to ask to interview on a few issues. You can go back, good God, 23 years ago. No, I take that back. 25 years ago, I was on Crossfire with him when he was, so he was just a 30-year-old back then. But really the fact that he's been told this by friends in the agency or somewhere in the government, in the Trump administration, it's just a sign of desperation. And, I can understand Ratcliffe doing it because Ratcliffe is just a tool of Israel. And, we can't rule out the possibility that he'll come after people like myself and Ray McGovern and Doug McGregor and Danny Davis. They'll try to intimidate. They wouldn't be doing that if they were winning. If the war was going great and they were triumphing as they claim they are, they wouldn't be doing this. So this is just another act of a desperate government. But fortunately, Tucker's got a lot of money, and he can hire the lawyers he needs, and this will be a PR disaster for the Trump administration.
Larry, the other rumors, let's start with these rumors. The other rumors is about Netanyahu, and two recent videos of him are both created by AI.
Right.
And what can you say about the situation around Netanyahu and his case? Because he's not participating in these, in these security briefings that he usually is part of that.
He didn't participate in one. So we haven't seen, I don't know if they've had another that's been televised. I view it as just a distraction because it's not affecting the conduct of the war towards Iran. So I don't know who's putting it out to, it's one of those shiny objects that a magician uses to distract attention. And I think that may be part of it, just distract attention from the fact that the war's not going well for Israel and the United States, despite their claims that, they're wiping out the Iranian Navy. Just as a side note on that, I heard Carolyn Levin, we've destroyed 100 ships. So I went back and said, how many, the CIA fact book, which I just learned they've stopped publishing now as of 2026. But the last one was in 2025. And the total size of the Iranian Navy was, actual ships that float above the water, not including submarines and such, was about 80. So they've destroyed 20 more ships than Iran has as its Navy, which is, again, just the hype, the line that goes along with these kinds of events.
Donald Trump says that the kamikaze boats, most of them were destroyed by the United States. Here is what he said.
Iran has been. So they put out phony story. The kamikaze boats don't exist. They're fake. And you can almost see that when you look at them. It looks great, yeah. Because if they did exist, we'd hit them just like we hit other boats all over the place. But they don't exist. In fact, some of the people say, where are the boats? How come nobody's seen the boats? You know why? Because it's AI generated. It's fake. And I found, I didn't realize this before we started, but Iran is known for a lot of fake news. And they deal with our fake news. And I actually think it's pretty criminal because our media companies, who have no credibility whatsoever, are putting out information that they know is false.
And here is the video we've got from Iran about the boats.
تصاویر شهرهای زیرزمینی شناوری نیروی دریایی سپاه از خبرگزاری صدا و سیما منتشر می شود.
Yeah, this is for the first time they're showing these, tunnels with.
Yeah. I think those are called bog hammers.
And how come Donald Trump feels that it's all about AI when it comes to the Iranian people coming to the street? It's AI.
Well, if it's if it's AI, then great. Send our ships in there. They don't have anything to worry about. Because Iran's been 100% destroyed. So what are you waiting for? Iran's 100% destroyed. They've lost. They don't have any boats. They don't have any submersibles. They don't have any torpedoes. What? Open up the Strait of Hormuz. I mean, if that was the case, then that just underscores he's lying, because the Strait of Hormuz is not open for normal shipping traffic, and Iran retains the ability to stop it. And they didn't put all of those those small attack boats out so they could be videotaped and seen above on the water. They've kept them in secure locations, and they'll come out when needed, if needed. Right now, I think Iran's they're doing quite well in shutting down the maritime traffic out of the Persian Gulf. Yeah, all they got to do is call Trump's bluff. AI, great. Then what are you waiting for? You don't have anything to fear, right? I mean, if he says it doesn't exist, then what the hell are you waiting for? Instead, why are you asking for all these other, hey, China, England, France, come on, everybody get together. We'll have a flotilla. We'll open that strait. Well, I thought you said it was all destroyed. I mean, God, I can't keep track of the lot. I'm going to have to get one of those neck braces, that you get when you're in an automobile accident and you get neck whiplash on the neck. I got to get one of those because, I can't keep up with this back and forth. But, my neck's hurting.
Larry, the Trump administration, the other day he was talking about the genetics of Iranian. This is not, they're not like us. They're different.
You mean they're humane, they're intelligent, they're honorable, they're decent human beings, unlike the trash that surrounds Trump? Sorry.
Because it seems to me that he feels the same way that Netanyahu feels about Palestinians. You see all these people, Amalek, they don't see what is, the basis of this sort of mindset. Because these people are so much, if you decide based on these sort of ideologies that you have to fight, you have to go to war, you have to destroy these countries because they're not going to obey. Because Donald Trump, let's put it this way, what the Iranian media, most of the Iranian officials right now feeling about the United States and their strategy in Iran, for example, they say that the United States wants us to be slave or you're going to be destroyed.
Well, look, whenever the United States goes to war, the first thing it has to do is dehumanize the enemy. Because if you approach them like they are human beings like you, it's certainly tough to kill them. As long as you can convince people that they're cockroaches, that they're like in World War I, the Hun, World War II, the Jap, the slopes, the slant eyes, the yellow monkeys. Not exactly what you'd call humanizing them. The Krauts with the Germans. And you go back and watch even the cartoons that were put out in the 40s by Warner Brothers with Bugs Bunny. They'd portray the Japanese with big buck teeth and slanty eyes, and make them out to be like monkeys. Dehumanize, then it's easier to kill them. That's what this is about. Because if you show them as they are, and that's one of the reasons that State Department is pissed off at CNN for going over to Iran and showing the Iranians as they are. Oh, God, you mean they're not out clubbing women for not wearing a hijab? You mean they actually have children that laugh and smile and play together? Well, we can't have that. That'll humanize them. So, unfortunately, that's been the U.S. Method of operation for so long.
Larry, Donald Trump was trying to force at least a political move together with European or NATO countries, and he also tried to bring China into the conflict and to say, "Come here and help us to open up the Strait of Hormuz." And the German government said, what else can we bring to the table? What else can we bring to the war? Because it doesn't seem that they're much capable of changing the battlefield. How does Donald Trump in? It was a political, he wanted some political move, he wanted militarily move, or a combination of both. What is your understanding of what he was asking for?
You mean Trump?
Donald Trump.
Help me. Help me get out of this mess. I wish we should put like a musical track down for these different things that Donald Trump says. Like on this one, I'd use the Beach Boys. Help me, Rhonda. Help me get her out of my heart. Help me, China. Help me, China. And help me, China, please get through the Strait of Hormuz. That would be the lyric, okay?
Exactly.
And the Chinese are sitting back going, what's with this guy? Because if you have defeated Iran by 100% destroyed, 100%, no, 120% destroyed, defeated, then why do you need us? I mean, you've defeated them, so why do you need all of us? Should be a piece of cake. Go ahead, send your troops in there, send your ships, go for it. And they're not doing it because the military commanders realize this would be a suicide mission. No, we're backing off. Donald Trump still thinks he's doing the TV show, The Apprentice. It's all staged. Like when he attacked Karg Island. Oh, we devastated Karg Island. He left all the oil facilities, oil terminal intact. Next day, reportedly, Iran was still shipping oil out of Karg Island. Reportedly bombed an airstrip and maybe some I don't know if they were radar sites or what, but whatever he did, it didn't change the strategic or tactical picture at all. And and then you step back and realize there is a reason why the United States has restricted Israel. Do not attack the oil terminals in Iran. Because if you do that, if we do that, Iran then will take out all the oil terminals in Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Kuwait, Dubai. Whoever's got oil terminals and pumping oil, Iraq, it's going to disappear. So then it's not just that there's 20% of the world's daily needs for oil is not getting shipped out of the Gulf. It will lose 20% of the world's capacity, period. It'll be taken off the books. And then you're going to be looking at years of shortages. And that's going to have a direct impact on economic growth. So that's why the Trump administration, even with all of its craziness, they haven't given them the green light for that. What I do find fascinating is, again, I'll call it the religious conviction of Iran with respect to retaliation. When they did vow, you hit our oil, we'll hit your oil. You hit our ports, we'll hit your ports. The one area, though, that they did not, and one of my readers pointed this out to me, and I'll get you to verify if you think it's true, is when the desalinization plant was hit in Iran. Now, admittedly, that affects about 8% of Iran's ability to produce fresh water. Iran did not retaliate in kind against the Gulf Arabs, because to do so would have meant that many of those countries would have been faced with a complete breakdown of their system of fresh water. It could have really caused the deaths of hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people. And this one reader reminded me that the legacy of the Imam Hussein, and when he fought against the Sunni army, 3,000 man strong army, and he was only with 70 followers, and they were deprived of water for 3 days, and they died in that war. That is a foundation, if you will, of Shia Islamic outlook on the world, and they're not going to do that to other Arabs. They're not going to do that to other Muslims. They're not going to do that. They recognize that they're not going to do to others what was done to them. And I thought, that's pretty profound. Is it? You think that's a fair interpretation?
It is. Yeah. That's the foundation of the Shia faith, Larry. And it's not about it. Every year they're talking about it. They're just, it's huge when it comes to the Shia Muslim.
Yeah. And we've seen, the United States spends an enormous amount of effort trying to demonize Shia Muslims. But when you go back and again look at the history of Iran since the Islamic Revolution, Shia Islam has not encouraged suicide bombers, just the opposite. It was during is the point that we talked about on Friday, during the Iraq-Iran war, when Iraq attacked Iran, and then the United States started supplying Iraq with chemical weapons, and first used in August of 1983, and continued to be used 20 times until August of 1988. During that entire time, Iran did not respond in kind. It didn't say, okay, we're going to produce chemical weapons and we're going to use chemical weapons on Iraq. They didn't do that. And I believe it was not because they lacked the scientific skill to develop it. It was the moral foundation of the Islamic Republic, that this is not a contrived belief. It is genuine, and the religious principles undergirding it are quite strong. So, and this is something the United States doesn't grasp. We assume that they are as devoid of moral principles as we are.
Yeah. Larry, you mentioned the case of the air defense system of Israel, the THAAD system and the Patriot system. And we had some reports that their air defense system is getting into trouble because the interceptors they're running out of the interceptors.
No, you're wrong. They're not running out. They have run out. It's depleted. I mean,
the time of Israel said that. The time of Israel said we're not running out of interceptors.
Oh, well, they said they're not running out. That's a lie. It's basic math, and you're an engineering professor. You can help out the audience here. So, 4,620 Patriots were produced since 2015. It may actually have been less, because when I did that calculation, they said that during the first 6 years, it was between 100 and 300 were being produced. Well, I went with the 300. If I'd gone with the 100, that's 600 as opposed to 1,800. That's a gap at 1,200. But at the end of that, as of the end of 2025, December 31st, 2025, there were a grand total of it at most of 4,620 had been produced. So let's work through the math. You've got, and the math essentially is this. There's a missile battalion. Every missile battalion has between 4 and 6 batteries. So you can run the math, the calculation of a battery times 4 or a battery times 6. Then each battery can have 72 or 96 of the PAC-3 missiles. So again, that gives you, so at one end you could multiply one battery, one battalion, one battery of 4, and then 4 times 72. So that gets you about 300 PAC missiles at the lowest end per battalion. And then at the upper end, do 6 times 96. Okay, that sets sort of the upper and lower. When you realize that every time you fire a Patriot missile, or you got an incoming missile that you need to defeat, you got to fire at least 2. Now, I'm ignoring the fact that we've seen multiple videos where they fired 4, 5, 6 Patriots at one missile, but let's just go with 2. That means under the ideal circumstances, with 4,620, they could only produce 3,300 or 2,310. They could defend against that many missiles and cruise missiles, ballistic missiles. Well, Iran in the first 15 days of this war, they were firing on average about 50 missiles a day. But let's call it 40 missiles a day. That's 600 missiles right there. So if a Patriot missile had never been fired in anger, that you would have been having a total supply of 2,310. But what we know is at least 1,000 have been shot off in Ukraine. So that, let's go from 2,000, the capability to defeat 2,300, subtract another 500 out of that. What are we down to? That's about 1,800. And so we've just described that they would have used 1,000 in just one. So they're depleted or almost depleted. The situation with that is even worse. They produced from the time they started production in 2007. And as of 2025, so January 1st, they had 900 total. And once again, with those, you fire 2 against each missile. So they're either depleted already or they're almost depleted. But they certainly no longer have, neither the Israelis nor the United States have the defensive missiles in place capable of shooting down Iranian ballistic missiles and cruise missiles. That's a fact.
Many people in Israel, the Israeli media reported that they're not receiving these warning signs before and it seems that there is some sort of internal failure of, in informing the people that a missile is coming, for example. But is that related to the radar?
Yeah, no, that's obvious. When Iran took out the radars, the U.S. radars throughout the, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Bahrain, and Jordan, they took out some at Al Muwafaq Al Salti Air Base in Jordan. That wiped out the early warning capability. So yeah, that was why Israel's effectively blinded now. The other thing is, with really no air defense, Iran can sit back and hit whatever target it wants in Israel without, they don't have to worry about the air defense systems anymore. And the longer this war goes on, whatever sort of, I'll call them subsidiary systems the Israelis have, those too will be depleted. the concept of air defense that the West has relied upon was based on an assumption that the country would only launch 1 or 2 missiles. They didn't expect about 40, 50, 100. In the early days, February 28th, March 1st, 2nd, 3rd, yeah, Iran was firing a lot more missiles, but they were older missile varieties, and they were firing them for the explicit purpose of depleting the U.S. inventory, because they don't have an unlimited inventory, and they cannot produce Patriot missiles and THAAD missiles in larger quantities overnight. It's the system is not. It wasn't automated. It was sort of designed to be built by hand in order for Lockheed Martin to make more money off of the contract. Candidly, and there's some people out there claiming that I don't know what I'm talking about. Well, they're entitled to be stupid, but all you got to do is it's not a great secret. The Department of Defense, with the Congress, proposes a budget, and the budget gets funded, and in that are line items for THAAD missiles and for PAC-3s. So you know what the basic cost is, and you can calculate how many missiles are being produced. There's no great secret. This isn't like some highly classified information. Now, they do want to keep it quiet what their actual inventory is, but you can't deploy and use these missiles as they have been in Ukraine and Israel and then claim, oh yeah, we got ample supplies. No, they don't. They're stripping missiles out of the Indo-PACOM command. Used to be called Pacific Command, but that means with respect to dealing with China as a threat.
Larry, Donald Trump was asked if he's ready to declare victory. He said that he's not ready to declare that. And even though, what is the timeline on the part of the United States? How do you see your expectation is the next 3 weeks that going to be the peak of the war? Because the war is turning into a war of attrition.
Oh, it is.
As you mentioned.
Yeah.
And as time goes by, Iranian official, yesterday we had, the foreign minister of Iran having an interview. He had an interview saying that Iran is not asking for ceasefire, is not asking for negotiations. Even those enriched uranium that were part of the discussions before, they're not anymore on the table to discuss with anybody. And here comes the question to many people are asking, if Iran feels somehow comfortable and they feel that they're confident about their capabilities to fight this war as time goes by, and it doesn't matter how long does it take. But on the part of the Trump administration, do you see any sort of wisdom that what is the end for them? What is the achievement? And what are the main objectives to be achieved during the war that is happening?
Well, they didn't define that very clearly at the outset. I think they were banking heavily on, I'll call them rumors, but the reports that General Ismail Khani, who was head of the IRGC, that Khani was actually a secret intelligence asset of Mossad, and Mossad had convinced the United States that, hey, we got this general who's a cooperating informant, and if we simply kill the rest of the leadership, he can step up to take the lead, and he's got the IRGC. He'll be able to command them, and Iran will fall. I think that was the plan. Again, if these reports are true, but I think they are. So once that fell apart, once Khani was discovered and executed, then the entire plan of the regime change and the new leadership of the IRGC that's cooperating with Israel and the United States, that disappeared. And they didn't count. The Trump administration reportedly ignored the warnings that Iran was quite capable of shutting down the Strait of Hormuz and would do so. I'm not sure how far they went in warning about Iran's counterattacks or attacks on U.S. military facilities, but I'm pretty sure that they were briefed and warned about that as well. And then we simply do not know how many missiles Iran actually has in its inventory. Someone I once considered a friend was saying that, I was, making some of this stuff up, but I'm not. We've seen the images of the missile cities, these underground cities, literally hundreds of miles of tunnels where these munitions are stored and produced. And I maintain that that alone prevented the United States and Western intelligence from getting a good account about how many missiles Iran actually has. All we know is they've fired now over 52 waves of missiles, just wave after wave. That's they're averaging about 3.5, 4 missile waves per day. That doesn't strike me like somebody who's running out of missiles, number one. So you've got this, you have the United States miscalculating on that front. And they also didn't count on the fact that all of their military installations in the Persian Gulf are being destroyed piece by piece. So I think Iran's demands will be, in fact, they've started to confirm this. Reparations, repair the damage done to Iran, lifting of all sanctions, expulsion of U.S. military personnel from their bases in the Persian Gulf. And, at the same time, it looks like, Iran may actually be doing a favor for the people of the global South by destroying Dubai, destroying the United Arab Emirate. That is one of the most shameful regimes on earth today in terms of the economic exploitation they do of Filipinos and other Asians that have come to the UAE to work as slaves. Their passports are confiscated. They are kept there, kept in inhuman conditions. And then you've got all these extremely wealthy people who've been, using it as Satan's playground. They claim to be an Islamic country, but they're not. They violate every tenet of Islam. And the war is actually starting to, force all those extremely wealthy people to get the hell out because it's not safe. And so it's bringing a form of justice in that regard.
Larry, it seems that the northern part of Israel is just being somehow destroyed by missiles and the attacks from Lebanon. It's a combination of forces from Iran and from Lebanon. How do you see that front? How do you see because Israelis are talking about ground forces going to Lebanon and to fight in Hezbollah.
Deja vu all over again. 2006, Israel invaded southern Lebanon to defeat Hamas or Hezbollah, and Hezbollah kicked their ass. The Israel lasted 33 days, and then, let's have a negotiation to end this. So we've been fed this, propaganda over the last 2 years of as Israel has destroyed Hezbollah. They set off the cell phones, exploded, blew the hands off of little children, did the same with radios, and then got rid of Bashar al-Assad, installed a jihadist that hates Shia, the character al-Jalani, aka al-Sharma. And, boy, Hezbollah was done, right?
Yeah.
Nope. Hezbollah rearmed, retrained, re-equipped. They're still there, and they're fighting in a defensive position. They're able to ambush Israeli forces. They're taking out tanks. They're killing and wounding Israelis. Israel's now talking about trying to call up 450,000 reservists. That'd be 10%, roughly 10% of Israel's entire population under arms. They can't sustain, because those reservists, once they come out, they're no longer contributing to the economy. So, if it's 450, okay, it's 5%, not 10%, but still a huge, huge portion of their population. And they're going to find, once again, they cannot defeat Hezbollah. Hell, they couldn't defeat Hamas. And they had more favorable terrain in dealing with Hamas than they will have with Hezbollah. And Hezbollah is up to its game. It's got better rockets now, better rocketed missiles. And it's still, though, it continues to target primarily military targets, not civilian targets.
Larry, you talk about reservists. Are they of the same quality as we saw in Ukraine? Because you remember those days of Ukraine running out of soldiers. They went to the reservists without sufficient training. They sent them to the battlefield. It was a meat grinder.
Well, look, Israeli soldiers in general are they're very poorly trained, very poor discipline, lousy leadership across the board. So, numbers doesn't equate with quality. And, the problem with the Israelis is they're like a criminal gang. They're not a modern army. They're not a professional army by any stretch.
Do they really want to use them in Lebanon, or they want to use them in Lebanon and in Gaza? Because nobody's talking about Gaza right now.
Yeah, that's the point. They're stretched thin. That's why you have to call up 450,000. I mean, God, they've already got like 250,000 mobilized. And with that, they cannot control a territory that's 5 miles wide, 25 miles long. Any other army should be able to take care of that quite easily, but not Israel. And it's because the people fighting Israel are actually fighting for a cause. They're fighting for their land. They're fighting for their right to exist. And as much as the Israelis, the Zionists, try to dehumanize these people, calling them Amalek, these people, these fighters, they're not willing to give up. So Israel cannot win militarily. Ultimately, it will have to eventually negotiate and agree to treat the Palestinians with respect and let them have their own state.
Larry, when it comes to the attack on the Khark Island, it was, from what we've learned from Iranians, from the Iranian media, that they have evacuated, or they have moved out 60% of what they had on that island before the war started. Mm-hmm. And since the war started, we've seen a lot of tankers going there and taking oil, and I don't know, exporting the oil to other, to the countries who are receiving oil from Iran. Well, when it comes to the Khark Island, what was the strategy? It was just somehow out of nowhere, because what was the strategy? Many people are asking that.
What is that word? What is that word you keep using? Strategy? Are you implying that they had thought ahead, had a plan with objectives? Oh, dude, come on. Where are you getting that? You are being too generous.
Because they were talking about troops on the ground, and this is somehow confusing to me.
No,
that doesn't make sense. You think that it was just, as Donald Trump said, we're going to attack it again just for fun. I don't know, what does that mean?
They remind Donald Trump reminds me of an orangutan in a zoo. And if you've ever gone to a zoo and the monkeys, they defecate and then they start throwing their feces at people. That's Donald Trump. He's a feces thrower. I mean, there are cruder terms I could use, but try to clean it up. So keep it as a family program. No, they look. When I first thought, when the first reports came out, it was, oh, they're destroying Cargill and they're bombing it. I thought, man, this is a stupid move. They take out the oil terminals. Iran's going to turn around and take out all the oil terminals in Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Iraq, Qatar in particular. But then, a little bit later, Trump puts out his truth, the post on his Truth Social account saying how they had struck military targets, but had left all the oil alone. I'm thinking, well, what the hell is this? Then I learned he had bombed the runway. It was a 6,000-foot runway. So if you're going to put U.S. troops in there, if you have a secure landing zone, you could fly them in on like a C-17, but a C-17, which I think it can carry around at least 200 soldiers, maybe more. It needs a 6,000-foot runway to land on, or 3,500 feet. Well, Trump had bombed the runway there, and only 3,000 feet were usable. So that meant a much smaller aircraft, the C-130. C-17 is jet-powered. C-130 is propellers, rotate. So it appears it was just like, let's show we can do something. And then the reports that were coming out from the people on Carg Island was like, they really didn't hit anything of any importance. There's now the reports, they're sending these 2,200 Marines. They're going to occupy Carg Island. How are they going to get there? So we've already ruined the airfield, so you can't just fly in and let them land. And the notion is that they'd fly in unopposed, not get shot out of the air. You can't guarantee that. They'll sail up on a amphibious troop ship and deploy. How are they going to get through the Strait of Hormuz? So, they activated the 82nd Airborne. They could jump in. Yeah, they can jump in, and then what? They've been subjected to unrelenting drone attacks, FPV drone attacks from Iran and artillery. So none of this, they're not thinking this through. They keep thinking that if we just, like a bodybuilder on the ocean with his shirt off, flexing the muscles, everybody going, ooh, he looks strong. That's what Trump is trying to do, just flex muscles on the beach. The problem is, he's fat and out of shape, got a bad case of the man boobs, and, everybody else is unimpressed with all this flexing. So it's nothing that the United States is doing right now is being done as part of a coordinated strategy. It's a disconnected tactical events.
What's so amazing to me that Donald Trump would put someone like Pete Hegseth as the head of Pentagon. He's amazing, Larry. He's quite a phenomenon when you look at the way that he's talking about the war. And how can one believe that this guy could provide any sort of, valid analysis to the president of the United States? Here is what Pete Hegseth, the way that he's talking.
Because you, and I mean specifically you, the press, specifically you, the press corps, because you cheer against Trump so hard, it's like in your DNA and in your blood to cheer against Trump, because you want him not to be successful so bad, you have to cheer against the efficacy of these strikes. You have to hope maybe they weren't effective. Maybe the way the Trump administration has represented them isn't true. So let's take half-truths, spun information, leaked information, and then spin it in every way we can to try to cause doubt and manipulate the public mind over whether or not our brave pilots were successful. How many stories have been written about how hard it is to, fly a plane for 36 hours? Has MSNBC done that story? Has Fox? Have we done the story how hard that is? Have we done it 2 or 3 times so that American people understand? How about how difficult it is to shoot a drone from an F-15 or 16 or F-22 or F-35? Or what it's like to man a Patriot battery? or how hard it is to refuel midair, giving the American people an understanding of how complex and sophisticated this mission really was. There are so many aspects of what our brave men and women did that, because of the hatred of this press corps, are undermined because people are trying to leak and spin that it wasn't successful. It's irresponsible.
Yeah, the guy is just.
Well, let's put it into sports terminology. Do the winners of the World Cup, who have performed on the field and people saw them score the goals, when they win, they don't need press spin to explain their victory. I mean, the victory it's evident, self-evident. Same with Super Bowl champs, same with World Series champs. The results are there for you to see. It's when you get a Secretary of War or Secretary of Defense, as they used to be known, having to go out and try to coerce the press into supporting an administrative narrative. I mean, this was being done before Pete Hegseth was born. They did it in Vietnam. Oh boy, we blew up X amount of hamlets. We destroyed X number of villages. We killed this many Vietnamese. We destroyed this many artillery pieces, yada, yada, yada. And what happened? We lost the war because those kinds of counts are irrelevant to what's taking place strategically. So we claim, we've wiped out Iran's navy. Well, Iran never really had much of a navy, number one. They never saw themselves as a maritime power. They got more of a Coast Guard than anything. And they've got critical Coast Guard assets that are still hidden and able to be deployed very rapidly, and the United States can't stop that. We destroyed their Air Force. Again, they never claimed to be an air power country. But they can sure launch a lot of ballistic missiles that we cannot stop, that we are unable to defeat. And that is a result of a long plan that Iran had in place. So Pete Hegseth, unfortunately, is proving himself not to be a very smart person. Yeah, he attended Princeton University, but he's really sort of a simpleton. The other day he opened his mouth and committed war crimes, saying that we're not going to show any mercy with no quarter. Well, wait a second. If somebody surrenders, you don't have the right to kill them under international law. But see, that's the point. The United States no longer recognizes international law. We declared ourselves to be a law in and of ourselves. We get to do it. Whatever Donald Trump feels becomes the operating standard. And once you establish a lawless environment like that, it is rule of the law of the jungle. The strongest survive. And in this case, the reality is Iran is stronger than the United States cares to admit, and the United States is weaker than it cares to admit.
Larry, before wrapping up, here is the poll in Politico. They have published this poll. It shows that it's asking, the people of mostly the allies of the United States in Canada, Germany, France, United Kingdom, they believe that the 21st century will belong to Beijing rather than Washington.
Yeah. I think that's exactly right.
It's not just about the West Asia. You see all around, going to allies, the most important partners of the United States. They don't feel that much about that the United States is somehow gaining something. They're losing in their eyes that they see how China is growing.
Yeah, well, China, despite U.S. propaganda to the contrary, is not trying to conquer the world militarily. Its Belt and Road Initiative is a more old-fashioned, hey, we're going we're going to bring you a box of candy, some wine, and some flowers, and we'll take you out to dinner. They are trying to romance the world, not coerce or hold the world hostage like the United States is. And the only way the United States tries to fight that is by claiming that, in fact, China is this coercive military power, which China isn't. It fascinates me how the United States ends up creating these narratives that are entirely false, but they become the dominant. People believe it, like particularly with Iran. The narrative is that Iran is a hostile, vicious, authoritarian state, that it has killed thousands of Americans. All the 663 Americans that died in Iraq as a result of explosively formed projectiles, EFPs, are entirely blamed on Iran. Now, that's not the case. But in that narrative, the United States ignores the fact that we illegally invaded a country, and that the inhabitants of that country, maybe they did get support from Iran, but it was the inhabitants of that country that fought back against this invader. We had no right to be there, none whatsoever. And yet, when we put ourselves in that position, get killed, then we want to blame those who fight back. China's not out killing people. China doesn't have the blood of more than 1 million Iraqis, Afghanis, Syrians, Libyans on its hand. Just the opposite. And yet the United States continues to try to persuade the world that China's the threat. We got to stop them. China's building things. The United States is destroying things.
Unfortunately, yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much, Larry, for being with us today. Great pleasure, as always.
I'm glad I could participate. Hopefully it was useful what I had to say. We'll see you Friday, I guess.
Friday, exactly. Yeah.
All right. Let's get that shirt thing worked out by then.
Yeah, sure. See you soon,
right.
Larry.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.